So I'm hoping this is going to be the last installment of chasing down check engine light codes in this 99 Lexus ES300. So I've replaced a couple of ignition coils, and the remaining codes that I have are P1155 and P0125. I mentioned in a previous video that I think that they're oxygen sensor related. So P0125 is insufficient coolant temperature to reach closed loop fuel control. P1155 is air fuel ratio sensor malfunction, bank 2 sensor 1. So for P0125, my initial inclination was it's coolant temperature related. But then I looked at the second half of the description, which is to reach closed loop fuel control. So first you got to understand closed loop fuel control versus open loop fuel control. Open loop is the most basic of EFI or electronic fuel injection systems, based on the fact that you have to have a known stoichiometric ratio of about 14:1 air to fuel. You're basically taking your mass airflow sensor, you're measuring the amount of air that you have on the intake side of the engine. You use that to say, okay, here's how much fuel that I need. You inject that proper amount of fuel based on those calculations, and then you just spit the exhaust out the end, and you don't do any further monitoring. So closed loop fuel control is when you're still using the mass airflow sensor to measure that mass of air. Based on that mass of air, you know how much fuel to inject. Then the exhaust goes into the exhaust stream, and an oxygen sensor is measuring that amount of oxygen left over. That oxygen level can then determine whether you have too much fuel or too little fuel, and so you can then give that feedback loop from the oxygen sensor on the output side of the engine back to the intake side of the engine, and you can adjust the amount of fuel. So this lets you dial in that air-fuel ratio to a very precise measurement, and it gives you better gas mileage, it gives you a cleaner running engine, and it's just better all around. Now, for your engine to actually go into closed loop mode and start using the air-fuel ratio sensors or oxygen sensors, the engine has to get up to a proper operating temperature. So the question is, what turns the oxygen sensor on and what gives the signal that you're up to temperature? Well, you've got the cooling system, you got coolant switches, but here's an oxygen sensor here. And I'll point out that there are 4 wires here. There is a white, 2 blacks, and a blue. So for a basic sensor, you only need 2 wires. You have a voltage input, then you have a variable response based on the sensor reading. The other 2 wires on here are an actual heating element. It's a resistance heater element that helps the sensor actually get up to temperature. So if there's a problem with the circuit on the existing oxygen sensor, that could cause it to not ever go into closed loop mode. The fact that P0125 was paired with 1155 makes me think that this oxygen sensor just needs to be replaced. So for a quick description on bank 1 versus bank 2, bank 1 is on the back of the engine near the firewall, bank 2 is on the front of the vehicle near the radiator, and it also has an air-fuel ratio sensor or oxygen sensor right on the front. There is a third oxygen sensor, and that is downstream in the catalytic converter. And based on reading the exhaust after the catalytic converter, the ECU is able to tell if you've gutted your catalytic converter, if you've completely removed your catalytic converter, or if it's plugged, and if it's not having that chemical reaction to further clean your exhaust. But based on the codes, like I said, it's the same sensor, but I'm going to go ahead and replace the one. Mine is bank 2 sensor 1, so I'm going to replace it on the front of the vehicle. Alright. So bank 2 sensor 1 is right here on the side of the exhaust manifold. Oxygen sensors are notorious for being stuck pretty good, so I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of PB Blaster. Now they make special oxygen sensor wrenches that are basically a socket that has a slit in it so you can get it over the wire and use a socket wrench. I don't have one of those with me right now, but I do have a 7/8 open end wrench, and I think that because it's pretty long it'll get some good torque, and I think I can crack it free pretty easily. Okay. It was actually very easy, so I'm just going to unscrew the rest of this by hand. So now I just got to follow this wire harness and get to the connector. And it is to the right of the engine block. Looks like it's right over the starter motor here. Ah, there we go. Alright, so this might be hard to see, but on this dipstick tube right here, I think that's transmission fluid, right behind this radiator hose, there is a zip tie that holds the sensor wire harness. Alright, so I actually didn't have to cut it all the way, but you can see there's a little ratcheting action. If you can get to both sides of it, it'll just open up. Alright, so make your life easy. The Denso oxygen sensor comes with a little bit of anti-seize compound. Put this on the threads of your oxygen sensor, so if you ever have to replace it again, you're not going to be fighting with it with the wrench in a tight area. So I'm just going to screw the sensor in first, get it started by hand, and then snug it up with the wrench when I'm done. Easy enough. I'm just going to thread this connector back up the way that it was on top of the starter and get it plugged into the wire harness. And with incredible quickness, that little zip tie piece completely disappeared and I can't find it, so I'm just going to use a regular zip tie to fasten the wire harness back to this dipstick. All done. Time to take it for a test drive and see how it goes. Using my scan tool, I cleared all the codes and reset everything, and I drove it about 20 minutes. And nothing has come back on, no check engine light, everything is operating exactly as it should. I hope that the videos helped a couple people. A lot of the codes and a lot of the repairs were very straightforward and could be done by anybody. But you know what, there's a lot of people out there where just having the check engine light on the dash is unnerving enough, much less scanning the codes and seeing that you got 7, 8, 9, 10 of them or whatever. So the biggest takeaway that I hope that you guys get from this video is not so much the step-by-step on how to replace individual components, but more so the overall logical process of understanding how the vehicle works and thinking through, if you got 7, 8, 9, 10 codes on your car, how can you logically think through all of them, determine which ones might be paired up to the same malfunction, and how you can think through and logically make a plan of attack to eliminate these check engine lights. So thanks for watching and stay tuned. Next time we should be moving on to some more fun topics such as lift kits, tire carriers, and off-road accessories for Nissan Xteras.